You're listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, hosted by Stanfield Gray and John Yarian.
Welcome to Southpod, Rise of a Region. We are in the studio today with Smashing Boxes CEO Nick Jordan. Nick, tell us where you're from and describe for our listeners a little bit about Smashing Boxes.
Great. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, but migrated out east to the Carolinas for college, and we are currently in Durham, North Carolina. Smashing Boxes is a software design and development company. Started mid-2010. We've grown organically for, I guess that'd be 7.5 years, to about 55 people with an office in Durham, and we've got a second office in New Orleans.
Nick, give us one tangible. You make things, right? Which is exciting. Your team actually makes stuff. Give us an example or two that we can really picture in our minds. What's something that comes out of that building or out of a production partner that we would be interested to hear about?
Yeah. All of our work is owned by our clients, so they make stuff. We just bring their ideas to life using technology. That's our mission. We're enablers. But it's an exciting time. So it used to just be, we made an app that helped increase loyalty for merchants because it could detect your location, and you can kind of start to fill in the blanks on any mobile app that is X for Y, the typical, metaphor play for your pitch deck. But now things are becoming more, they're converging. So physical devices are being tech enabled. So we made a better mousetrap. Literally, it's a mousetrap for a pest control startup that has sensors that communicate back to a software application that lets the app know when the sensor's been triggered. So I love that it's not just a metaphor, it's real.
Literally.
But it's pest control for like big box enterprises, warehouses, facilities. It saves a ton of manpower because you have somebody that's walking around a facility just aimlessly, and now they can be a lot more smart about it. So we have stuff like that. We also are working, that's fun and kind of dirty, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, we're making a mobile app that helps people manage their insulin injections on a regular basis from a new startup that has a drug delivery mechanism. So they're making the hardware, FDA clearance, managing that process, and we're ultimately just taking data from their delivery device and porting it into an application for their customers.
And how prescriptive do you get to be in this process? In other words, do companies engage with you and basically identify an objective, i.e., more consistent alignment with their insulin regimen, and then just go, and then you guys ideate and come up with something? Or do they say, hey, we want an app. We literally want a mousetrap. How much do you get to define what it is?
Yeah, so our clients are prescriptive in the outcome that they want because it's their business, and they've made the determination that they need technology to help it. And with us, it's specifically going to be around software, whether it's web or mobile. It's just a front-end client. That's kind of doesn't matter. But inside of that, we have a lot of flexibility to create, to ideate, to think about the user, the customer's experience, and how they're going to interact with a brand, a service, a product. So the ultimate delivery of the solution, we have a decent amount of control over. In many cases, sometimes it's even more prescriptive than that. Like, I need the Android version of my iPhone app, and we don't want to create two completely different feeling experiences because that's going to be hard to maintain over time. But yeah, it's varying levels of prescriptiveness, but it's never come up with an idea that's going to help me manage my crypto portfolio, because it's just too open-ended, and we're never going to be able to scope that client down into something that we can all agree on.
In a broader sense, when the magic happens for the client, talk a little bit about your design thinking. You know, like, for example, is Smashing Boxes a metaphor for your approach to it? Was there an origin to how you said, we think we can deliver something to the client in a unique way that no one else is doing? Let us into the history of that maybe a little bit and what it looks like.
Yeah, well, that's great. Smashing boxes, I don't think it's a metaphor. It's actually just description. You know, we're going to smash boxes. We get calls thinking we're a moving company sometimes, and they try to order some boxes. I think it's a joke, and then the joke's on me because I wasted 30 minutes of my time. But no, we like to think, you know, there's the metaphor, I guess, would be the box, inside the box, outside the box, and we just want to eliminate that. The box would represent just preconceived notions for how things are delivered, how an experience is delivered, how a UI is delivered, how a feature is delivered. How does a car show up here and pick me up? That sounds so simple, stupid now, but that was really novel when Uber and Lyft and other ride-sharing companies first came out with that. Like, it just shows up because you have a map and you request it. So design thinking does apply on the tactical level or the actual, hand-to-hand level of the phone or the device and how you interact with it, but it also applies on more of the human-centered experience. So where am I in space and time as a person that wants to interact with a service or a business proposition? That's important to take into account as you're building software, because it just has to add value to all parts of this transaction, not just did I swipe left, right, or did I tap and hold. That's one of the later parts of the overall transaction between a company or startup and their customer.
When you're considering user testing, specifically, and I want to back up for a second, we are South Pod, and so you have two offices based in the South. There's sometimes a distinct view of what the South means in terms of the demographic, the history, the culture. Does that play in any way to your approach to user testing? Do you think of the region, or is that could it be anywhere?
I think it can't be just anywhere, but I think it's like there's New York City, San Francisco, and then everywhere else. So the biggest difference, and then maybe international. So domestically, there's New York City, San Francisco, and then everywhere else, and then there's the rest of the world. So language and cultural barriers, I don't know, or fake like I know their user behavior or cultural issues. But in the States, out west and in New York City, they're more accepting of like future forward kind of design thinking and products. So everywhere else, it kind of needs to work and make sense right out of the gate. And that sounds pretty intuitive, but it's not, because there's so many products being launched in a market like Silicon Valley / San Francisco that the things that differentiate them from another thing are small and really nuanced. And every basic business model seems like it's been covered by them, so everyone's one-upping each other to the point that if some startup from Silicon Valley was here, it might not be adopted by everybody at the same rate. So there's more, I guess, just potential customers that are trained to use the next biggest and greatest thing in Silicon Valley, but the rest of the country is not. They're just now adopting Uber. For example, I don't want to make any hasty generalizations, but I don't think it's South specific. I think it's kind of like my cousin a long time ago came back to Indy with these like Pogs. I don't know if you ever heard of those, but they're like these little, coins you flip, and it was kind of like blackjack or jacks or whatever, and it never really spread to the right. Kind of things would innovate and happen there, and kind of get like a little bit of a wave over, and then a lot of them just kind of fizzle out and die because it wouldn't meet the same kind of criterion of like mass adoption. So bringing it back, I mean, user testing and user adoption is different everywhere except those places where they're getting inundated with the next big thing all the time. And so that's something that we have to take into account, is where are our baseline of users.
Well, now that you've thrown shade on everywhere but New York or San Francisco, which offends us a little bit on South Pod. But you did spread the shade out equally.
I thought it was the opposite. I thought I was being too negative against them. Like, this is a crazy idea. It's like Silicon Valley, the show. It's true.
We can adopt stuff. We can. We get technology. I'm curious though. And yet, in defiance of all that, you're headquartered in Durham. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing there? Why aren't you on the West? I mean, explain why you are where you are, and then what's that like, given everything that you just said.
Yeah,
the way technology is adopted.
Well, I mean, really, in my mind, I was doing the inverse of shading everywhere but those two places. I feel like it's overkill.
I'm not really offended.
Well, no, but I think it's overkill in those big markets. Like, it's, you know, Instagram, there were probably 20 competitors that just handled the way the filters were executed slightly different, and one took off. And that's not really adding a lot of value to the world. And it's such a great example of many things ecosystem-wise, but a terrible example in other ways, meaning everyone there is raising or has a startup. It's just like, it's as if we should all know exactly what it means, and it's less about what value are you driving to the world. So I don't know. I was in Durham and I was working on a startup, and it kind of didn't go anywhere. And I joined another startup, and that kind of didn't go anywhere. But I liked the idea of the rest concept, you know. But 10 years ago, that wasn't even a thing either. It wasn't like the rest. Let's make a brand and position ourselves as not this in other cities. But it's a sense of community. So I was there. And I like that we had something kind of percolating, and it was around tech. And I generally think that good ideas are location agnostic.
Yeah. This seems like some kind of blend of moral conviction and inertia. There's some ratio there where you were already there, but also saw a pattern, and saw an opportunity. Talk for a minute about what that's like in terms of talent acquisition, the way you engage brains and hands and eyes and all the interesting work you do. Is the team pretty distributed? There's contractors around the globe. Are people heavily congregated in the two locations you described? And what's that like, given that both of them are in the South?
Yeah. Almost all of our talent is in one of those two offices. I mean, we've got I say we have two remote employees, but they're both in Richmond. So at one more, we might as well say we have an office in Richmond. One of them was a transplant from Durham, went up there and brought his buddy along with him. It's actually a humongous competitive advantage for us, and a great value prop to maybe large startups that are raising in some of the bigger markets, because there's not the same ecosystem that there is out west, and therefore the great people go to the cool and interesting companies that provide the type of kind of culture and mindset that you would get at a startup in a Silicon Valley. So we have a really strong talent magnet in our area. And there's a lot of good units, all the same good pieces. There's good universities, there's good quality of life. That's a thing that's, makes our area strong, but we're uniquely positioned to recruit.
Are you noticing an acceleration of the development of those startup ecosystems?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, every place wants to have a startup ecosystem, because a successful one is a massive economic development tool. It's jobs, it's awareness, it's like swag and, street cred. Like, yeah, we've got startups, so anyone can come here and be cool, even you, big company XYZ. It's a lure for other large companies that want to be around it. So, I mean, in general, I think there's like a movement towards cities. There is kind of a thought that every city has this history and culture and character that can't be replaced with like modern, like a strip mall. You can't like remanufacture the history of Charleston or of Durham or even of like a Cleveland, And so I think a lot of these places are finding ways to become hubs for activity, for business, for retail, commerce, and startups are a great way to do it, because they can start small and lean and nimble and grow. It's not a big CapEx or capital expenditure, and so you can, if you can create the right elements, you can have an unlimited amount of economic growth via startups if your startups are good ideas. So why not make that investment to try to pull them in? So yes, is the answer.
And real quickly, why New Orleans? were just the right people were there, or what's?
Yeah, totally not happenstance, but I mean, I gave a talk at one of their larger entrepreneurial events, which is their entrepreneurship week.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, kind of networking biz dev, like, hey, I'll pitch a talk around something. I can't remember what it was. And I just met a lot of people, like leaders in the entrepreneurial community, connectors, influencers, and they felt really authentic and committed to growing a tech ecosystem. And then back to what I said, like culture, character, history of New Orleans is tremendous. It's super old, lots of history, and those are things you can't replicate. And so a lot of talent, a lot of people that tend to work at companies like Smashing Boxes value work-life balance, culture, opportunities for like arts, entertainment, music, and it has it there in spades, more so than Durham. But in contrast to Durham, for example, its startup ecosystem is less developed. So it felt like a good opportunity for something very complementary. We could bring some of our skills. We've got a lot of strong engineering community. There's technical schools. We've got a strong startup ecosystem. Their engineering community and startup ecosystem weren't as strong, but they've got lots of great work-life opportunities.
Let's pause for a sponsor message. We'll be right back.
It's in Charleston. Good people, good food, good coastlines, and you can build a company and go sit on the beach on the same day. For me, as an investor that's just traveling around, it's sort of the easiest way to meet the largest group of entrepreneurs from the region.
This is one of the only conferences in my life that I've ever been to more than once. I think you have the potential to do something very meaningful with what you're doing here, and I believe that there is an enormous opportunity for some of the biggest brands in the world, biggest companies in the world.
Back again, and let's dial back into your history a little bit. So we've talked about the company and what you guys are up to, but I'm curious how you personally got into this space, what led you to it, and put you at the pinnacle of Smashing Boxes.
Yeah. Cold day, April 12th, 1981, Indianapolis, Indiana. I was born. This is going to be a while. How much time do we have? I'm kidding. I went out to Carolina for college, was in the business school there.
Thinking you were going to do what? What did you think?
Go to New York City and be a banker.
Really?
There's only 2 jobs when you're in business school that interview on campus. It's consulting and banking.
Okay.
So it's I would go to career services. I did this once and was like, yeah, what kind of jobs are out there? Let's look at the interview calendar. There's McKinsey, there's Bain, there's JP Morgan, so I was like, oh, that's helpful. I ironically got a job with Bloomberg. So it was finance related, but it was selling software to them. So I was selling the way it was delivered at the time, I think this is still true, is you install an actual Dell unit. It's got 2 monitors, a custom keyboard. Yeah, it's your terminal.
Yeah.
So I got to use kind of my finance skills of knowing what securities were and markets, and I knew a lot more at the time, but I've lost it all since. But it was ultimately sales and technology, and I was like, okay, I like technology. It's fascinating. I had 2 or 3 other real jobs lasting about 2 or 3 years before quitting and becoming a full-time entrepreneur. I think some of that is DNA too. So, I had a landscaping business in college. Well, technically it was an irrigation system company. Did not go well, never successfully installed a single sprinkler system. Sold 10 clients, got my first one to pay, and drastic failure. Had a lot of those oddball things going on. So I think that was, but I don't know. Some of this is just all the right time.
So
right
you
place.
learned you're good at selling complex mechanical systems, but not actually implementing.
That's
them.
right. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good.
Don't. Okay. I'll edit that.
Okay. Yeah. We'll cut that.
I could explain something that was complicated too. an end
Yeah,
user. So
yeah.
that I've just never
Yeah.
thought about that until today, but that was my skill with selling software
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, being an entrepreneur or small business owner, I don't even think it was called entrepreneur. I graduated in 2003 from college. So I don't even know if you said entrepreneur. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna be like a business owner, small business owner. And that was kind of like almost a code for like, unemployed, like, or a realtor. No offense to realtors. So it was like, yeah, I'm a business owner. Like, oh, but no, you're an independent rep for the insurance agency. That's different, So like it wasn't even cool, and like doing a tech startup was not feasible in the late 90s. That was like kind of the .com bubble bust, and it was the whole story about that was it was capital intensive. You had to do shitloads of money, to buy servers. So it just wasn't even a thing. It was like that was an enterprise deal.
Yeah.
But with technology improving, infrastructure improving, making the cost less, you could be like a small business owner and have a tech company. You have that same kind of like I'll do it myself mindset. So obviously we saw that with Facebook and a few other startups of that generation. This was, I guess, Web 2.0, but you could start something in your dorm room, and if you could like piece it together, it could eventually grow and become valuable. So I think that sparked a lot of people, obviously, to be inspired to say, hey, I can make something myself without the big barrier of I need millions first, then start to make something.
Yeah, well, I think there's like a beneficial irrationality in there, right? So there are certain people who, just because they don't know how they're going to figure it out, they're committed to doing it. They think it can work, right? Which is a pretty fundamental entrepreneurial characteristic. Yeah. And it seems like that relates to the work you're doing today, which is, I mean, there's a heavy, really, invention responsibility here. Like we're making things that by definition do not exist previously. We're not just iterating. I mean, is that fair? Would you consider that to be a core characteristic of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything is new, which is fun because, I mean, that's where our team's passion is. It's being entrepreneurial, but it's helping other people make their ideas reality. So anytime anybody has a business idea, I'm immediately excited and I want to join their company. It's like, I'm doing this. It's like something. It's like going to be a smart door lock. You're like, oh my God, but that's amazing. It almost doesn't matter. It does kind of matter, but if it's exciting, it's exciting. And it's not always going to space level of new. Sometimes it's a business model iteration, or sometimes it's literally a better mousetrap, but it's still new and it's changing how things are brought to bear in the world, and that's kind of why I got into it, because I always liked ideas and I like new and I believe in myself, and that's how I became an entrepreneur. But the access to being able to see, work, create something that I can afford to create, take it to market, get money, grow from there, wasn't always something that was a real dream when you needed a big chunk of money to even take step one.
So tell us about the generation of those ideas. What are you reading, listening to? Do you have a mentor in your life? I mean, how do you get inspired? And when there's a new client, what do you need to take in and absorb in order to propel that idea forward?
Yeah, I'll try to answer this as best I can. I like, some of this is wiring, I think. I've tried to get hobbies. I bought an old car that I was going to fix up. Immediately realized I don't have tools, nor am I handy. I don't even install our IKEA furniture. My wife does. So I was like, wow, that was a terrible investment. I joined a golf course. I don't think I've broken 100 yet. I feel like I subscribed to Garden and Gun with the idea like I was going to go hunting. I was like, I don't even have any gear. So like I kind of have struck out on meaningful hobby. Oh, I bought a raised bed for gardening. I was going to garden my own like salad and salsa. And that shit didn't work out either. It all died.
Nobody actually follows through on the raised bed. That's not just you. That's all of us. Yeah.
So, but I really like ideas. I like businesses. It's just more fun, and gives me energy. So most of my time spent consuming content is around that too. So podcasts, books, shows, articles. I mean, the podcasts kind of come and go. I like Tim Ferriss because he's kind of a mindset guy. Gary Vee is annoying but interesting to listen to. I used to listen to Stanford Entrepreneurial Thought Leadership Series. It's kind of a little more academic, but definitely digs in with startups. This Week in Startups with Jason Calacanis. And I've kind of since expanded out to some other things like around, like biohacking and other general technology-based pursuits.
So it sounds like you're the kind of guy who buys Tools of Titans from Ferris, and you're like flipping through the chapter, trying each thing. I'm into that. I'll try that. Let's do this.
Yeah, I like the storytelling component. I don't know if I've put a lot of it to practice right away because some of it like kind of takes a commitment. But I'm like, I just read Buffett. Like my grandparents are from Omaha, so I felt like I had to read it because we can talk about Buffett. He's the Oracle of Omaha investor of Berkshire Hathaway fame. But that was a cool, I guess, biography written by somebody else about him. It really shed a lot of light on his mindset and how he looked at investing and how he developed rules and systems and followed them to the point that I don't even know if he was happy or if he's miserable in life, but he had a set of rules and a practice that he was disciplined about. So yeah, I mean, anything is kind of fair game. You can get ideas from anywhere. I'm lucky actually because we're enough of a company and a brand that I attract ideas now. And so, the person who's making our conference room desk is a woodworker is like, what if we launched a company that does XYZ? I'm not going to tell you because I want to launch it with them. But, I get ideas come to me from outside sources, which is another source of energy. So, yeah, I mean, that's a big cauldron of ingredients that somehow spits out good ideas for clients, or at least good perspectives that I can share and experience share to maybe let them, iterate on their assumptions.
Is there an underlying roadmap for you or a set of principles like Buffett or like Ray Dalio or something like that, or that you work through consciously or maybe that you sense?
I mean, I'm kind of like, I like business and I like money, and I kind of grew up playing sports, and so, you kind of rule with a dictatorship, so I can kind of be an asshole. But in general, my principle is actually like help people and do the right thing, and then ... good things will happen. So, yeah, I mean, helping people see their little baby dream grow up into a real company is rewarding. Having real professional development with our staff. We give everybody half a day on Friday to tinker and learn and grow, to see what they can do. We invest into our community. I think doing good while doing well is a good principle to kind of manage, I guess, your own sanity. But if we're always putting value out there first, some value will return to us. And I think would probably be our underlying principle.
Can you tell us anything about stuff that you and your team have invented by accident as a byproduct? I mean, there's got to be stuff banging around the office that, came through some round of iteration that does something that surprised you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if anything is earth-shattering, but some tools we use are fun. Like we do a lot with Slack bots. Slack is kind of our internal messaging, but our Slack bot, we made a Slack bot called Maestro that controls the music. So it's got kind of playlist features, banning features, voting features. It's actually accidentally turned into this really like fun social hub online.
Yeah, wait, hang on. I need that. We need that.
Yeah.
Like my team need. Can I get that? Is that a thing or?
Well, no.
Terrific.
You could, but Spotify actually sunsets their support for a few APIs that this was built on. So it's kind of a Spotify thing, not a Slack or a Slackbot thing. But things like that, it's not like a surprise that we invented some miracle like technology. It's more about how things get used. It was supposed to literally be a playlist, but now everybody knows each other's musical tastes, and it becomes the source of memes and like content and fodder that fuel relationships, and friendships. And, it's kind of like, the sitting and having a beer with somebody. You talk about stuff, but that's not the way you need to do it anymore. It can be like through your crazy musical tastes. And so that is one. I mean, we've built other things that have turned into odd like pieces of art. So we made this tool that we thought would be a great like promotional campaign thing where you take a photo and it would turn it into glitch art, and it could project it onto any kind of screen, and no one really wanted it, and it kind of just turned into its own installation. Like we ended up making an installation with LED lights, and it would like you would walk in front of it and it would show you yourself and So people would stop and stare at it, and then they'd see themselves kind of like glitch art out, and
It would be like vaguely upsetting, but I'm into it.
Yeah,
That
we
sounds
actually
like
we got it in
fun,
like
too.
a storefront at a 21C museum in downtown Durham. So it was a storefront installation. So we were accidental art creators. That's not really. I don't think I'd ever describe myself as that. But that's really cool too, because that was made by pretty hardcore engineers. Some of which were software engineers for us that had electrical engineering background. So they were like wiring up boards and circuitry. But yeah, that kind of was turned into an accidental thing of value. But yeah, and that's probably the extent of that. I mean, we have a thing that times how long it's been since our last pot of coffee was mixed, because that's important. You don't want to.
It is important. Is this another thing I can't have, or
Well, it's like hardware. It's an IoT solution, so we would have to 3D print you the
frustrating
hardware.
conversation?
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is really unhelpful.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could have my team just kind of live at my house for a couple months, because I'd be like, my whole life would be automated.
You know,
automated.
congrats to the listeners. Here's a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff they can't get.
That's right.
It's a great thing to know about now.
Let's put on your future prediction hat for a second. Obviously, everyone's crazy this year about AI and what's happening with Alexa and various bots and IoT connected devices, autonomous cars. What are you sensing is going to be the real cultural game changer in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, maybe that range?
Yeah, I mean, I think a rule of thumb is you overestimate what can happen in 1 year and you underestimate what can happen in 10. So that's kind of an interesting thing that's mind-blowing. But I think AI, IoT, machine learning are like their infrastructure. So they're like the internet when it came out. So it's not the AI itself, in and of itself, isn't the killer app. It's that platform is maturing and available to build stuff on it. Sensors, IoT, that's not like a one-off install isn't the future killer thing that's going to change the world. It's the fact that there's going to be sensors everywhere and data seamlessly being collected off of those, and then someone can do something with that. And then someone can apply intelligence to it, and then someone can apply machine learning to that, and someone then can render it through an AR experience. Maybe I don't think we'll have screens, we'll have screenless interfaces. So I think I don't have a singular idea of what that all means, other than these platforms are maturing and they're converging technologies, and the stuff that you can do on top of it will be extremely different than what we have now, which is still confined to more or less a screen on a device in your pocket. I think kind of the future is going to be a lot different.
So if you're gauging your kind of optimistic view versus pessimism, digital utopian, digital dystopian, where do you fall on the spectrum?
I mean, yes, I think digital and technology is going to enable and empower so much awesome stuff. And right now we're all still super excited, but look at social media. Well, don't look at social media, but I don't have any of these apps on my phone. I don't have any notifications on, because I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, all right, that's hurting my life more than it's helping. That might apply to anything, but I think people come into balance on their own when they're out of balance. So that next big push forward into new frontiers might get a little too extreme at first, but then we'll naturally, reset ourselves, but be in a more advanced technological state. So I think it's all good, but it doesn't mean we don't go too crazy for a little bit and then dial it back.
Speaking of dialing it back, thank you for joining us at Southpod, Rise of a Region, where our guest today, Nick Jordan, the CEO of Smashing Boxes, touched on so many subjects. We are very grateful to have him here, so thank you, Nick.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.